Good morning. It's great for the Next G Alliance to be back at this great show and with these great sponsors. Today we're really here to talk about the future, and not just to talk about the future, but talk about how we collectively can help shape the future. So let me talk a little bit about just some very brief background on the Next G Alliance. It was exactly 2 years ago, October 2020, when we had a group of 15 founding members get together and decide, basically it was the right time, the right place to translate a call to action into a commitment to act. And so very quickly we saw companies and academia and government agencies kind of coalesce around this concept of laying out kind of this vision from a North American perspective around 6G. And the good thing is we've got this really kind of broad ecosystem where we're seeing involvement from across industry and leading universities and now government agencies. In addition to that, we have almost 1,000 resources that have been brought to the table across all these members. And we've never really seen anything like this in this pre-standardization phase. Along with that came this foundation of reports. So at the beginning of this year, we began to issue some reports and white papers. I'll talk about why that's important from a foundational standpoint, but not only are we seeing a lot of interest from our membership, but we've had over 15,000 downloads of our documents during the course of this year. So there's this broad interest and curiosity about what's going on right now in 6G. One of the really important foundational aspects of the Next G Alliance is this life cycle approach. And right now, to our knowledge, this is different than we see what's developing kind of at a global level. And we've kind of adopted the branding of research to realization and all these various stages in between. So if you just step back for a moment and look at where we are right now in this life cycle, we're really at the kind of the beginning. We're probably 4 years away from the detailed standards development work commencing. But that also tells us we've got this 4-year window, this opportunity right now to really lay out a vision and to do all the things we need to do in advance of the deep development of use cases and requirements and all the things that come along with standards. The other point is that it's really important to look at this from a feedback perspective because a lot of the benefits we're talking about don't necessarily have to be backloaded into whatever we define as the 6G marketplace end of decade. There are things that can come along the way as we have insight into research areas and R&D areas and so on. A lot of this can be factored into how we review things like job of the future, education of the future, impact to all of our surrounding industries. These benefits we can really realize along the way over the next several years. Just to give you, just to kind of share, we've talked about the founding members and the full members. This is basically the companies that are basically provide the guidance at a steering level right now. At its heart, the Next G Alliance is a private sector-led organization that's basically relying on collaboration with academia and government. So these are the companies that are across this whole ecosystem that are shaping the Next G Alliance as a whole. Another important layer of this, of course, is the contributing membership. And this is what's growing very quickly right now. We've got specialized companies, we've got research laboratories, we have now 20 academic institutions, leading institutions in the US and Canada. And we've got beginning to kind of see verticals now joining the Alliance as well. So between the contributing members and the full members, these are all the companies, agencies, and institutions that are basically shaping our working groups. And to that, we've also added government membership starting this year, where we've got now 5 government agencies. And just to explain, these agencies are participating at the technical workstream level from the standpoint of needs and contributing to the vision. There's another whole layer in terms of the Next G Alliance working with government as a stakeholder and talking about things like research funding, talking about incentivizing the industry in both directions. So right now we've got this, the really strong foundational commitment from across all 3 sectors. One of the important things we did at the beginning of this process was to take the time to define a set of collective goals. We call this our 6 audacious goals. And so these are things, when you get 100 different entities, of course, participating, you want things you can kind of gravitate to from the standpoint of alignment. And so these are kind of our key anchor points for the organization. Within each of these boxes are many smaller boxes, and I think that's where you'll see some of the how regions will differentiate themselves from other regions. As you start talking about security and privacy and trust, for example, there are very specific things that we have in this region of the globe in terms of how we view all these factors. And they may differ from other parts of the globe. So that's just an example of kind of where we both align, but also where we see some differences. Another example would be the commitment we have to more of a distributed cloud and communication approach overall to 6G. One more final point in terms of vision. We have really approached this from the standpoint that there is this multi-stakeholder view of vision that needs to take place. There's this core technology development layer, ground floor, all the technology developments that need to happen. There's also an application markets and innovation layer. And so this is where the academic thought leaders can drive this, industry can drive it, startup companies, basically kind of where all the innovation will happen across 6G. And then there's a kind of a top level around national imperatives. And I think this is different right now in terms of what we're seeing with 6G versus 5G, in that there's a commitment to really look at the societal drivers, look at the economic drivers, the public policy drivers, and all that be factored in from the beginning of this whole process. Have been issuing reports. This becomes a foundation. These are basically things that we have issued since the beginning of this year. So we've addressed things like sustainability, both within the industry as well as how can this industry help all the surrounding industries in terms of achieving sustainability. Of course, I've mentioned the roadmap and the vision. We've done deep dives into applications, deep dives into technologies. Now we're in the process of issuing a whole set of reports around our audacious goals. There's more things in the pipeline. We'll be publishing a report around kind of these big societal drivers as we see them right now. There's more work going on around sustainability in terms of how do you translate that into KPIs. And there's also a great deal of work going on around spectrum. And our approach to spectrum is taking this very organically from the bottom up in terms of what are the real spectrum needs around management and access, but have that be driven by things like applications to really get a good understanding of how that will drive spectrum for the future. I mentioned applications, so just to give you an example, this is how we've approached, at this point in time, how we've approached kind of the applications vision. You know, if you lead with metrics, it will take you down a certain direction. But we've tried to take a much more comprehensive look at this and say, what are the key things we're trying to achieve right now with NextG? And first thing is just a quality of life, everyday living. All the things basically to have immediate appeal and really have impact to society. The next is this kind of extreme user experience that will be reflected in media and entertainment and gaming and sports, but also things that can translate into, for example, the public safety area. Anything that has this kind of immersive technology surrounding it, based on holographic services, based on augmented reality and other things. The third area is around mission critical roles. And so these are things that are basically kind of surround the whole communications environment. And so again, we're talking about things that may involve e-health, it may involve public safety and hazardous conditions. We're thinking about things like agriculture. I mean, agriculture is only 1% of the US GDP, but it's a very important 1% in terms of our food chain. So that then has the whole concept of societal goals overlaid on top of it. And again, I've mentioned how we've really taken a look at how 6G can help at a national, regional level achieve societal goals and how that needs to be built into the design from the beginning. We've also been talking to a global partner. So the 5G Forum in Korea, the Beyond 5G Promotion Consortium in Japan, 6GIA in Europe. These are all kind of key allies and partners. We have collaboration agreements with all these organizations. We're certainly adding more as we go along. And I think you're going to see the nature of collaboration changing as well. And then we have contributed to the ITU. The ITU has a process where basically it publishes a vision, in this case, the IMT 2030 vision. The NextG Alliance has already contributed into that development as well. That will ultimately kind of overall define the gold standards. From the standpoint of research, this has been a very recent focus. We've done two things. The first is research priorities. We've taken all the work around from the various technical work streams, and we've generated kind of a holistic view of what we see as the important research goals research areas, and research topics. And so basically, if you're looking at this from more of a scientific funding perspective, you're kind of down to topical level. But if you're looking at this from more of a kind of a government policy, you're thinking more in terms of research goals. So we tried to capture all this. It's all publicly available. We will continue to evolve this, hone it as we move along, but we wanted to make sure we had that true anchor point. And then the NJ Research Council. We have a number of speakers in the room today that are from both the academic thought leadership perspective as well as industry research. We put about really 12 great minds together to help to drive, to help promote our priorities, but also to think outside the box in terms of, how do we currently fund research in this nation, in this region. Certainly we have the leading scientific research model right now in terms of our investments. But is there something on top of that where there's this holistic kind of a big win strategy that we should be looking at within this region? And what is that strategy, and how is it funded, and how does government and the private sector work together? I wanted to finish today with just a couple of closing thoughts. And then usually at this point, there's a lot of kind of different questions echoing around the room about a couple key topics. So just kind of hit these topics head on. The first one is from the Next G Alliance perspective. We really have to look at the long game. We have to think big. We have to think long. And when you get a group of technologists together, it's very easy to kind of start partitioning things, and you begin to start sequencing releases and to think in terms of that whole standards regiment. But what we're trying to do at the Next G Alliance is really just to focus on the future, focus on the end of decade. Let's not spend a great deal of time now, 8 years in advance, talking about whether something will be 5G advanced or 6G. Let's just think about the vision, what we're trying to accomplish, basically talk about what is possible and what needs to happen to make that possible, and not just at the technology layer, but at the policy layer and many other things. I talked a little bit about collaboration. You're generally better off if you're collaborating where you have a strong foundation, so collaborating from a point of strength. So we certainly in this region, we don't want to be reactive to what's happening around the globe. So we've been very measured in terms of our collaboration thus far, because we want to make sure that we can kind of build a foundation where we have, an anchor point. And as we engage other regions of the globe, we have an understanding of kind of what we're about, what we believe in, what we think are basically will be the key applications, technologies, and drivers. The third area is the question always comes up about hype. Are we overhyping 6G? And I would just say that there's hype everywhere. In industry, of course, industry invests great deals of resources and dollars to bring products and services to the market, and they strongly believe that they will be the solution for the marketplace. In academia, of course, you've got you certainly have your belief that you've got your leading institution, the best faculty, the best students, the best research centers, and even in government, there's the smallest amount of hype that exists. But without hype, there's no energy. And at the Next G Alliance, we're really trying to focus energy into the kind of the concept of kinetic energy. There's a concept of potential energy where it's stored and great thought, but what we're really trying to do from an NJ perspective is focus on the kinetic aspect of energy, where it's energy in motion. There's a dependency on velocity. So we're translating all these findings, these reports into actions. How can we take the next step in terms of a national, regional level of alignment around a big wing strategy right now? Final point is delivering a 6G vision. We talked a lot about vision and why this is so important. My favorite definition of vision is it's planning for the future with both wisdom and with imagination. And so from a standpoint of planning for the future of imagination, we're really looking at, again, what is possible. We'll figure out the technology, we'll figure out all the metrics and so on, but we should really be thinking about where do we want to be end of decade from the standpoint of what do we want to accomplish as a business, as a society, as as a nation, as a region. And we should also recognize that there are great ideas that exist right now in universities, and for that matter, with students in high school and middle school thinking about having great ideas and how can they innovate on those things? What can we put in place to make that happen? From the standpoint of planning for the future with wisdom, we've got this. If you look across, this region, we've got the great industries, we've got the great universities, we've got this strong government commitment to advancing, the future economy. And so if we could just harness this all collectively, there's really no other region that can match this. And so, again, that's the future vision of the Next G Alliance's focus on bringing this all together in a collective way. And with that, I look forward to a great event. Thank you.
Question or two? Yeah, so Mike, just one question, then maybe I'll throw it to the audience to see if they have any questions. But you mentioned we're a few years out from standardization and some of the global efforts. So how do you see Next G Alliance interacting with the progress towards standards and working globally over the next few years?
Okay. So I mentioned a couple of the Next G Alliance's global partners right now. And I mentioned them in this this window of activity. I think one of the things we should be thinking about is really how we can align with other global allies and partners over this next couple of years to really deliver kind of this pre-standardization view. Once you get the standards, companies are already kind of invested in their product design cycles and so on. But we could really give standards a great jumping off point. If we could all kind of agree on kind of, not a single vision, but areas where we all intersect. And so before we kind of get into use cases and metrics and so on, I think there is an opportunity now and over the next few years to really advance that through global collaboration.
Great answer. Do we have any questions from the audience? The lights are really difficult to see. A microphone is coming up. You just have, I see 2 questions, and then we'll probably need to move to the next. So, yes.
Good morning. My name is Taiwo Oyedari. I'm from Virginia Tech. Just a question on with regards to the current 3GPP plan for 6G. It does look like there is nothing yet going on. Are we seeing what they did with 5G, where the actual work from 3GPP side started from maybe around 2025, thereabout? Is that the same thing that we're expecting for 6G?
There's still work that's going on right now at 3GPP on 5G and 5G advanced releases. So there's not, in terms of the regimented standards process, the actual 6G work has not yet begun. But what has begun is the ITR, which basically, 3GPP kind of builds toward that overall vision. That work has begun, but it's at this higher level right now where Next G Alliance and other organizations are contributing.
Okay, thanks. So we have one other question from up here in the white shirt. Microphone's coming. Yeah, thank you.
Earlier time, so this is Roger from TDS, parent company of US Cellular. Earlier we heard about, I think Samsung mentioned that in 2028 they're going to have something out. So is this still the case, or we're seeing 2030 as the general deployment?
What we're seeing right now, announcements coming out from different countries and regions about things like proof of concepts. There are also activities that are going on where government is helping to stimulate their industries. So that announcement was basically, I think, more of a proof of concept in the marketplace. These are things we should be also thinking about here. That's currently on our radar. How can we make this happen? I think from a marketplace perspective, generally 2030 is kind of viewed as the target. But there are various activities that are happening in Korea, Japan, and other places right now where there are some test beds and there are some proof of concepts that are being announced with strong government support.